You're standing in the corridors of the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. It's November 16th, 1796, and something is wrong. Servants rush past you without speaking. Their faces are pale. Behind those gilded doors, an empire is holding its breath, because the woman who built it, who terrified kings and expanded borders further than any czar before her, is dying. And when she's gone, her enemies will try to destroy her in a way that no army ever could. Before we go deeper, I'd love to know, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. It amazes me every time how a scandal from 18th century Russia still reaches people across the entire world today. The woman dying in that palace is Catherine the Great, Empress of Russia for 34 years. Born a minor German princess with no claim to anything, she became one of the most powerful rulers in European history, which doubled the size of the Russian Empire. She crushed rebellions, corresponded with Voltaire, and turned St. Petersburg into a rival to Paris. But when she died on November 17, 1796, from a stroke witnessed by doctors and court officials, none of that mattered. Because within weeks, a rumor began to spread, a rumor so shocking, so obscene, so perfectly crafted to destroy her legacy, that it would outlive every military victory, every reform, every monument she ever built. The rumor claimed she didn't die of natural causes. It claimed she died during a sexual encounter with a horse, that the animal, suspended above her by a system of pulleys, had fallen and crushed her. It was grotesque, it was humiliating, and it was completely, provably false. But it didn't matter. The lie spread like wildfire across Europe, whispered in salons, printed in underground pamphlets, repeated in history books, and eventually embedded into popular culture so deeply that even today, more than 2 centuries later, millions of people believe it. So how does a lie this absurd survive for over 200 years? Why was Catherine targeted with this specific kind of destruction? And what does this tell us about how history treats powerful women who refuse to play by the rules? Let's go back to the beginning. Catherine wasn't born to rule an empire. She was born Sophie Friederich August von Anhalt-Zerbst on May 2nd, 1729. In Stettin, Prussia, now Szczecin, Poland, her father was a minor German prince. They had a title, but little wealth, no real political influence. Sophie grew up in modest circumstances, educated but unremarkable, destined for a respectable but forgettable marriage to some European nobleman. Then, at 14 years old, fate knocked on her door. She was selected as a potential bride for Peter, the heir to the Russian throne. No one knew then that this arranged marriage would become one of the most dysfunctional, dangerous, and ultimately deadly unions in European royal history. In 1745, young Sophie traveled across frozen Europe to St. Petersburg. She converted to Russian Orthodoxy, took the new name Catherine, and married Peter in an elaborate ceremony attended by the entire imperial court. It should have been a fairy tale of poor princess becoming the future empress of a vast empire, but the reality was a nightmare. Peter was possibly the worst choice imaginable as either a husband or a ruler. He was emotionally immature, obsessed with Prussian military toys, and according to court records, likely impotent during the early years of their marriage. But worse than his physical inadequacies was his open contempt for his wife. Peter humiliated Catherine publicly. He kept mistresses ostentatiously. He made it clear he considered his foreign wife a burden and embarrassment. For Catherine, a young woman isolated in a strange country whose language she barely spoke, the situation was desperate, but she didn't give up. Instead, she began a meticulous project of survival and, eventually, conquest. She learned fluent Russian, which her husband never bothered to do. She studied Russian politics and history obsessively. And crucially, she began cultivating allies. For 17 long years, Catherine lived as Grand Duchess officially, the heir's wife, but in reality, marginalized and frequently threatened. During this time, she took numerous lovers. This wasn't just about pleasure, it was political survival. In a court where her husband despised her and she had no formal power, intimate relationships were a way to build alliances, gain powerful protectors, and ultimately produce an heir who would secure her position. Her son Paul was born, officially Peter's son, though his real paternity has been debated by historians ever since. But regardless of biology, Paul was recognized as the heir, giving Catherine the indispensable role of mother to the future Tsar. When Empress Elizabeth died in 1761, Peter finally ascended to the throne as Peter III, and he immediately proved to be exactly the disaster everyone feared. In an act of political madness, he completely reversed Russian foreign policy, making peace with Prussia even though Russia was winning the 7 Years' War. Military officers who had fought and bled for years were furious. Peter then offended the Russian Orthodox Church with sudden proposals for secularization, alienating the most powerful institution in Russia. And finally, he made a fatal mistake. He publicly humiliated Catherine, threatening to divorce her, exile her, even lock her in a convent. He didn't realize that for 17 years she had been weaving a network of allies waiting for exactly this moment. In 1762, just 6 months after Peter took the throne, a coup was executed with surgical precision. Catherine, backed by loyal military guards, particularly the Izmailovsky regiment, struck. Peter was deposed, forced to sign an abdication document with trembling hands. And then, days later, he died in custody. Officially, the cause was listed as hemorrhoidal colic, but nobody believed it. Peter was almost certainly murdered by guards, with at least the tacit knowledge of Catherine. She had just done the unthinkable. A foreign woman, without a drop of Russian blood in her veins, had overthrown an emperor and seized the throne of Europe's largest empire. She was 33 years old, and she was only getting started. Catherine's reign would fundamentally transform Russia. Territorially, she was a conqueror on a scale that rivaled Peter the Great. She waged 2 victorious wars against the Ottoman Empire, annexing Crimea in 1783 and establishing Russian dominance over the Black Sea. She participated in 3 partitions of Poland, swallowing vast western territories. Under her command, Russia expanded by more than 200,000 square miles. But territorial conquest was only part of the transformation. Catherine reinvented herself as an Enlightenment empress, corresponding with Voltaire and Diderot, patronizing the arts, founding museums and schools. St. Petersburg transformed from a provincial capital into a cultural rival to Paris. She collected art obsessively. Much of what would become the Hermitage Museum's collection came from her purchases. She wrote plays, memoirs, and political treatises. She styled herself as a philosopher queen, bringing European culture to the Russian frontier. But there was a dark side. When Yemelyan Pugachev led a massive rebellion of serfs and Cossacks between 1773 and 1775, threatening Catherine's throne, she responded with a brutality that shocked even her allies. Pugachev was captured, horrifically tortured, and dismembered alive in a public execution in Moscow. Thousands of rebels were hanged along the roads as a warning. And after crushing the rebellion, Catherine abandoned any pretense of reforming serfdom, instead expanding the powers of nobles over their practically enslaved serfs. And then there was Catherine's personal life, the aspect that would generate the most explosive controversy. During her 34-year reign, Catherine had a succession of favorites lovers who received titles, vast estates, and tremendous political influence. Gregory Orlov, one of the coup organizers, became the first great favorite. Then came Gregory Potemkin, brilliant general, and probably Catherine's secret husband, certainly the love of her life and political partner for more than a decade. And finally, a succession of progressively younger men, culminating in Platon Zubov, 40 years younger than the aging empress. For 18th century society, this was scandalous not because monarchs had lovers. Kings did so routinely, but because she was a woman openly exercising sexual power. Women were expected to be passive, controlled, modest. Catherine was powerful, clearly commanding her relationships, choosing and discarding lovers at will. This challenged the natural order of things for many contemporaries. The propaganda began during her lifetime. European courts, particularly revolutionary France, which Catherine despised and fought against, produced obscene pamphlets portraying her as an insatiable nymphomaniac. Pornographic caricatures circulated, showing her in increasingly exaggerated and impossible situations. This was an established genre of political warfare. Marie Antoinette was similarly attacked. But for Catherine, the attacks were particularly virulent because there was a kernel of truth. She did have numerous well-known lovers, to which elaborate fictions could be added. And then she died, November 16, 1796. Suddenly, found unconscious in her private bathroom, comatose for 20 hours, dead, witnessed by doctors, family, courtiers, body embalmed according to Orthodox ritual, state funeral, burial in the Peter and Paul Cathedral. Everything meticulously documented, but the rumor started anyway. First whispers, then pamphlets in France, then gossip books. The horse story, the details varied, but the essence remained. The empress died during an encounter with an animal. The equipment failed. She was crushed. The story was perfectly constructed, shocking enough to be memorable, sexual enough to be titillating, humiliating enough to destroy a powerful woman's legacy, and vague enough in specifics that it couldn't be definitively disproven for those who wanted to believe. Why did this rumor take hold and persist when so many other royal scandals were forgotten? Multiple factors. Catherine had no powerful defenders after death. Her son Paul hated her, blaming her for his father's death. He wouldn't defend her reputation. She was a polarizing figure, hated by conservatives, French monarchists, religious moralists. The story confirmed biases. Powerful women are sexually deviant. Those who transgress norms meet grotesque ends. There's cosmic justice in a proud sovereign destroyed by carnal appetites. It was a moral lesson packaged as scandalous gossip. During the 19th century, the rumor solidified. It appeared in popular books, was cited in literature, became common knowledge among educated people, despite never appearing in serious academic histories, because historians who controlled primary sources could see it was false. But academic history and popular knowledge existed in separate spheres. Most people didn't read scholarly treatises. They listened to stories, read pamphlets, absorbed popular culture, and in popular culture, Catherine was the woman who died with a horse. The 20th century brought mass media, but not truth. The rumor appeared in films, television shows, popular books. Then came the internet, explosion, memes, viral posts, videos, millions of people learning about Catherine not through books, but through online jokes. Catherine the Great, the one who died with a horse, became a fact everyone knows. Common knowledge, self-evident truth, except it's completely, absolutely, demonstrably false. So, what is the truth? The truth is that Catherine died of a stroke in the Winter Palace, surrounded by doctors and family, after 34 years of extraordinary reign. The truth is that we have extensive, reliable documentation of her death. The truth is that the horse story was invented by political enemies, probably in revolutionary France, specifically to destroy the legacy of a woman who was too powerful, too successful, too sexual for patriarchal society's comfort. The truth is that Catherine was one of the most effective rulers in European history, vastly expanding Russian territory, transforming St. Petersburg into a cultural capital, patronizing the Enlightenment, and keeping the empire stable for more than 3 decades. She was complex, contradictory, capable of enlightened idealism and autocratic brutality, romantic and pragmatic, cultured and ruthless. She deserves to be remembered for the reality of her life and reign, not for political pornography invented to destroy her reputation. That the rumor persists more than 200 years later isn't testimony to its truth. It's testimony to the power of propaganda, the persistence of misogyny, and the ease with which society accepts and perpetuates lies about powerful women who challenge norms. When a woman rules as Catherine did with intelligence, ambition, sexual agency, and absolute authorities, she becomes dangerous, not to her empire, but to the idea of what women should be. And so the weapons deployed against her aren't just political or military. They're designed to humiliate, to sexualize, to reduce a complex human being and accomplished ruler to a crude joke. The horse story succeeded where her actual enemies failed. It made people forget the empress who added 200,000 square miles to her empire, and remember, instead, a fabricated moment of humiliation that never happened. Catherine's story is a warning. Reputations can be assassinated by well-crafted fictions, and once a lie embeds itself in popular culture, it's almost impossible to uproot, even with mountains of contrary evidence. We like our powerful women to be punished. We like our transgressive women to meet grotesque ends. We like our stories to confirm what we already believe about gender, power, and the natural order of things. So we repeat the lie. We laugh at the joke. We spread the rumor. And Catherine the Great, who spoke 5 languages, who built an empire, who corresponded with the greatest minds of the Enlightenment, who survived a dangerous court and a murderous husband, to become one of history's most effective rulers, becomes reduced to a punchline. She deserved better. History owes her better. And maybe, just maybe, by understanding how this lie was born and why it survived, we can start to see the other lies we've been told about women who dared to be powerful, sexual, ambitious, and unashamed. Because those lies are still being written. They're being shared right now, in our time, about women whose names we know. The methods have changed. The technology has evolved. But the goal remains the same: to take a powerful woman and reduce her to something small, shameful, and icily dismissed. Catherine the Great died in her bed, surrounded by the trappings of imperial power she'd fought her entire life to claim and keep. The horse story is a fiction, but the fact that it's the thing most people remember about her, that's the real scandal. And it's one we're all still perpetuating every time we repeat a lie instead of seeking the truth.